Hi guys, welcome back to the rigging tutorial. We are at this point here where we last left off was we had drawn all the joints for the character skeleton. Okay, we had set all the rotation orders and everything else. We have spine 1 being the root joint, and the pelvis being a child of spine 1 going down into the legs. So this video, what we're going to do is continue, and we're going to rig the legs of the character. Okay, the plan is to have an IK FK switching setup here that will allow us to go back and forth between IK and FK using IK FK blending. So I guess we should just get started and get going. Okay, so if I click on my left hip here and hit F in my outliner just so I can get down to this level here, we can see the hip joints, and if I hold on shift and click on the plus, it's going to open them up all the way down to the toe, and I'll do the same for the right side. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, if we're going to do an IK FK switching setup, we need to duplicate these hip joints twice. So it's going to be a total of 3 left side leg joints and 3 right side leg joints. So I'm going to go ahead just with the left hip selected. I'm going to hit Control D twice. Okay, and might as well do it on the right side. So select the right hip and hit Control D twice. I'm just going to move these up here just so that things are more visible here. Okay, let's start with the left side. So we need to name these left side joints. We need to name them so we can tell them apart. Okay, so the original one that we have here, that was the original left hip, we want that to be the left hip bind. Now why I call it bind, because that is the joint chain that's actually going to be bound to the geometry of the character. That is what we're going to skin the character to. Okay, so we're just going to call that bind, and the way that we can go through and change all of these here to and put bind on the end of them is go to modify, making sure that I have the left hip selected, go to modify, search and replace names. Okay, and then what I can do just to make life easy, I'm going to have it look for an L underscore, and I'm going to have it replace that with an L underscore bind underscore. So search for L underscore, replace it with an L underscore bind underscore. And if I hit apply, watch what happens to these joints. When I hit apply, you can see that it inserts that bind in there. Okay, so the next one here, this is the first duplicate we made. So here I'm going to look for L underscore, and I'm going to replace it with L underscore FK for forward kinematics. We're going IK FK switching. So the first one is the FK, and hit apply, and you will notice, of course, that now everything is FK. And then this one, we're going to replace that with L underscore IK underscore and hit apply, and now we have the IK joint chain. Okay, so I'm going to take this little 1 off of here because it was a duplicate, and the 2 off of here. So while we're here, let's do the right side. So here I'm going to look for R underscore, replace it with R underscore bind underscore, apply. This one is R underscore FK underscore, apply, and then this one is IK, and hit replace. Okay, then take the 2 off of here and the 1 off of here. Okay, so if we open them all up, you'll see that now they're named so to where we can tell them apart. Okay, so now that we have that and everything is a child of the pelvis, the next step is to make our IK handle. So the one that we're going to be working with initially is the IK joint chain. Okay, so I'm just going to close these up here so that we don't have a lot of clutter. I'm going to start with the IK joint chain. So I'm going to open up the right IK joint chain, and I'm going to hide the bind and FK, on both sides. So if I select the bind hip, FK hip on the right and the left side and hit Control H, it's going to hide them. Now in my viewport, all I have is my IK joint chain. Okay. and again, when we drew the skeleton, we made sure that we aligned them. This is the alignment that I'm going to use. I'm going to have the Y sticking out the side of the character, and the X pointing down the joint, and then the Z pointing forward. Okay, so now that we know that we have our orientations done correctly, and this is something that you really should check before you duplicate off the other leg chains, because it is of vital importance that all these leg chains have the same orientations. Because if your IKFK blending is going to work correctly, they all need to have the same exact orientations. Okay, this is very important. So make sure that you have your orientations set the way that you need them to be set in the original joint chain before you duplicate everything. Because if you then adjust orientations on individual joint chains and it's not the same anymore, your IKFK blending is not going to work at all. Okay, so that I cannot stress that enough. Okay, so we have our IK hip here. So the first thing that we're going to do is put an IK handle on the joint chain. So basically, it just, for those of you that might not fully understand the difference between IK and FK, IK is inverse kinematics and FK is forward kinematics. So what is forward kinematics? Forward kinematics is the natural behavior of joints. Okay, that means that the child joint follows along with the parent joint. So if I rotate this joint chain here, you see when I rotate the hip, my knee, ankle, ball, and toe all go along for the ride, right? That is because they are all children of the hip. If you look at my outliner here, this is the hierarchy here. The knee is the child of the hip, the ankle is the child of the knee, the ball is the child of the ankle, and the toe is the child of the ball. So anything that the parent does, the children will follow along. So if I rotate my knee, you'll see that everything below the knee moves, but the hip stays where it is. Why? Because the hip is the parent of the knee. So the knee cannot affect the parent in a forward kinematic relationship. Okay, that's why at the knee, it only affects everything below it. It does not affect anything above it. If I go down to the ankle only affects the toe, the ball and the toe. It cannot affect the knee or the hip because it is further down that chain. Okay, so that is the natural behavior of joints. They are forward kinematic by nature. What is inverse kinematics? Inverse kinematics allows the child joint to influence what is happening at the joints higher up the chain. Okay, so I can move something at the ankle and have my knee and hip move with it. Okay, so that is the relation. It's sort of a backward relationship. Okay, and it's very useful for things like legs because you can plant the leg and have it stay there. If you move the hips, for example. So if I was to take this joint here and move it, the parent joint, you'll see that the child joints below it go along with it. But if I had inverse kinematics set up on these legs, I could move the pelvis up and down and the feet would stay where they are. So that's what we're going to set up right now. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to make sure I'm in my rigging menu set here. I'm going to go to skeleton. And I'm going to look down here and where it says create IK handle, and I'm going to go in the option box here. I'm going to reset the tool just to make sure I'm at default settings. So current solver, there's two options here. There's single chain and there's rotate plane. For the hip joint, because the hip joint is a ball and socket joint, if you think about the skeleton, the real life skeleton under at your hip, it's a ball and socket joint, just like your shoulder. And anytime you're using a ball and socket joint, you generally want to use a rotate plane solver. The single chain solver is good for things that don't really have that ball and socket like movement. So for example, the toes where the ball of the foot is, and you can, you know, flap your toes up and down. That would be a single chain solver. And because it's only going between 2 joints, when we run the rotate plane solver, we're going to run it between 3 joints. So from the hip all the way down to the ankle. So it's going to affect the knee as well. And because we have a knee and we want to have control over where that knee points, we're going to use a rotate plane solver, because then we can also add a pole vector, which is a target for that knee. If this is not making a lot of sense right now, that's okay. You will see as we go along what I'm talking about. Okay, so make sure that we are on rotate plane solver, and we're just going to leave settings at default here. And I'm going to click on the hip joint. Then I'm going to click on the ankle joint. Okay, and you'll see now I have an IK handle that's been created here. It's called IK handle 1. So that inverse kinematic relationship that I was talking about, you'll see now if I move this from the ankle, I get rotation in my knee and my hip. Okay, so that I can do that at the ankle level. I can have that movement of the ankle affect the parent joints of that joint. Okay, so that is the inverse kinematic relationship. And again, now when I move my pelvis like I was doing before, this right leg does not have inverse kinematics on it. So as you can see, well, I guess I can't do it yet because I have to plant the foot, but this can be affected now. I can't do that here. If I move this joint, weird things happen. That's not what we want. So that is the inverse kinematic relationship. So we need a couple more IK handles, but I should start by renaming this one. So I'm going to call this left ankle IK. Yeah, call it left ankle IK, just to let us know that's the IK handle for the left ankle. Then I'm going to go back in my tool, create IK handle, and I'm going to switch this to single chain solver. And I'm going to run this one from the ankle to the ball. Okay, going to name this one left ball IK, and I'm going to hit Y to reactivate my IK handle tool. Again, I'm on single chain solver. I'm going to run this one from the ball to the toe. Okay, and we're going to call this one left toe IK. So we have ankle, ball, and toe IK. Okay, so there we go. That is our setup that we want here. Let's do the same on the right side. So I'm going to hit Y, reactivate the tool. And again, because I'm running from the hip to the ankle, I want my rotate plane solver. I'm going to click here at the hip and then click at the ankle. So we're going to go 3 joints down. You know, we're going to have a total of 3 joints there. Then I'm going to hit Y again to reactivate the IK handle tool. And we're going to call this single chain solver and run from the ankle to the ball. Hit Y. And again, run from the ball to the toe. Okay, and let's rename these ones here. So this is the right ankle IK. This one is the right ball IK. And the last one is the right toe IK. Okay, so right there we have now created our inverse kinematic legs, but it's not very easy to control, because in order to pick up my foot, I have to select all 3 IK handles in order to be able to pick up that foot. And you can see it's not exactly doing what I want it to do, and that's partly because my move tool is on object mode. Let me see if I switch it to world mode. There we go. Now I can pick up the foot. But if I was to give this to an animator, that would kind of be annoying, that if they wanted to pick up the foot, they have to select all 3 IK handles every time. Right? So we're going to make it a little bit easier. We're going to give the animator some controls for the feet so that they can just pick up, you know, select that single control, pick it up, and have the foot go for the ride. All right, so in order to do that, I like to use curves as my controls. So I'm going to select my EP curve tool. The other way to get to it is create curve tools, EP curve tool. And actually, I want to make sure that I go in the option box. So create curve tools, EP curve tools, go in the option box and set it to linear. Okay. Then, and actually what I should do is I'm going to make a polygon cube here. Just a default size polygon cube. I'm going to slide it off somewhere here. out of the way. And the reason that I'm making this is because I want to make a curve cube. Maya does not come with a native curve cube, so I have to make my own. I don't make my controls out of polygons. I make them out of curves because curves are easy to deal with. You don't have to worry about them rendering, and you can just turn off the curves. So I can come over here and turn off NURBS curves, and while maintaining my body geometry. But if I did that, if my controls were polygons, then they would turn off the body as well. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to go back to my curve, my EP curve, and again it should be linear. I'm going to come up to this cube here, and I'm going to hold down V, and I'm going to click at the corner. And where did that go? Let's try that again. Hold down V, click at a corner, and I'm holding down V to turn on my point snapping, so it's going to snap to the corners of this cube. I'm just going to pretty much trace around the corners of the cube, and I'm going to go around it. And don't worry if you have to overlap sections that you've done already. That's not a big deal. Just make sure you hit every single corner of the cube, and you can see the curve, the blue line on it is just telling you where you have actually drawn the curve. So just keep going around, making sure you hit every corner at least once. I think I need to do that. And then just look around and make sure it's got blue line on every single side of it. If it does, I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to create a new curve for me. And if I select my polygon cube here, I can delete it, and what that's going to leave me with is this cube that's made out of curves. Okay, now you can see that the center is way over there. I'm just going to go to modify center pivot. It's going to put my pivot back in the center. Okay, so I'm going to leave this one here, and I'm going to duplicate. So I'm going to select it, hit Control D, and make a copy. So I'll just leave this here. Anytime I need a curved cube, I'm just going to pull it off of here. Okay, so I'm going to bring this here, and let's go on the side view, which is this one, and we're going to position this around the foot. And I like to use a three-dimensional control for the foot because when I started rigging, I used to have just a flat curve on the floor. The problem with that, and I'll just demonstrate that real quick here. The problem with that, if I say use a circle, just drag a circle out here and use that as my foot control. So maybe I would scale it in and scale it out this way and say that was my foot control. The problem was sometimes if I had the character standing on a floor, so I'm going to make a polygon plane here as my floor. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'd have problems selecting. I can't select that curve very easily because it and the floor kind of occupy the same space. Okay, so using two-dimensional foot controls is not usually a good idea. The other thing you can do, if you did have a curve, you could simply go into the control vertices here, select them, and move some of them up like this. So that would basically make this curve now three-dimensional. So even if the character was standing on the floor, I could select that curve. But I like to use the curve boxes. That's just my preference. You know, feel free to do what works for you. So I'm just going to shape this around the foot here. Maybe bring this up, maybe bring this down, sort of shape it like as close to a shoe as you can really do with a cube. Okay, and I'm going to go in the front view here and select it and just slide it over, and I'm going to use point snapping to snap it to that. And I guess I should turn off my polygons because it's just snapping to the polygon. I'm going to point snap it so it lines up with that joint chain, the center of it. Okay, so let's bring back our polygons here, and I'm just going to scale it out this way, and let's look at it here, and that looks like it'll work. Okay, that'll be my foot control, maybe not so wide. So let's name this left foot control, and I like to abbreviate stuff just to make the object names shorter. So as you can see, we got all kinds of values in here that we don't need, and that is one of the most important things about setting up controls, is that at the default positions you want everything in the control to be zeroed out. Okay, so it's very important that we go modify freeze transformations to zero out all those values. Okay, so that if the animator wants to bring the character back to their default position, all they got to do is select these and type in 0 and have it go back to where it is. Okay, so if I move this over here, you know, if I move it up here somewhere, say the character was doing something over there, but then the animator wants to send him back to his home position, if I zero this out, you'll see that it snaps back here. Okay, now the other thing I want to do is make sure that if actually, you know what, I think I have this on a layer, so I'm just going to turn off this layer to hide the character. You'll see that my pivot point is way out here. Okay, I want to make sure that my pivot point is at the ankle, so I'm going to hold down D and V, and I'm going to middle mouse drag and put my pivot, snap my pivot to the ankle joint. Again, it was D and V, and then I used the middle mouse button to snap it there. So that's good. Now what I can easily do is duplicate this foot control here, and I'm going to call this, you know, I'm going to delete this floor, it's kind of in the way. I'm going to call this one right foot control, delete the 1 on the end of it, and then hold down V, just V, not D, because I'm moving the entire object, and then just slide this over till it snaps to that ankle. Okay, and again, by doing that, I have a value here. I need to go ahead and modify freeze transformations, and the shortcut is in this poly modeling shelf. That snowflake is your freeze transformations. Now you can see that I have zeroed out that control as well. Okay, the other thing that I like to do with my left and right controls is color code them differently so that I know which controls are for the right side of the body and which controls are for the left side of the body. So I'm going to, with my left foot control selected, I'm going to hit Control A to open up my attribute editor, and you'll see that I'm in the foot control shape node. I'm going to go to Object Display, Drawing Overrides. I'm going to hit Enable Overrides to turn this on, and I'm just going to pick a color from here. So maybe I go with that bright red. I like my controls to be nice and bright, and you'll see when I deselect it that control is now red. Let's do the same for the right side. I'm going to select that, and all this is already open, so enable overrides. And for that side, what am I going to pick? Should I go with green, or should I go with, let's see, I like the brighter colors. You got yellow. Yeah, let's go with, see how yellow looks. Let's go with the green. I think I like the green. There it is. So I have green for the right side and red for the left side. Okay, it just makes it easier to see where things are, because, you know, once you have a character in a scene with props all over the place, it can start to get a little cluttered in there, and you know, you might not be able to tell what control is what. The color coding certainly helps. Okay, so rotate order on this control. Again, I'm in the attribute editor. I'm going to get out of the shape node and go to the transform node here. Click on that. There's my rotate order. So the rotate order that I'm going to go with is, let's see, just so I'm going to do a lot of this sort of up and down here on the x-axis, but I'm also going to do some of that. So so before I do that, actually, I'm going to switch this to gimbal mode. And again, I'm holding down E and left click, and it'll bring up that menu. The other way to do it is just double click on your rotate tool, and you can switch it to gimbal there. So looking at this, I'm going to go back to my attribute editor. Okay, looking at this here, rotate order, I'm going to do a lot of this X rotation right here, and I'm also going to do a lot of this Y rotation. So I like to be able to, when I rotate out in Y, still be able to go down, up and down like that. So I'm thinking Y might be my most important axis. Let's just think about that here. Otherwise, you know, this sort of side to side may not be the most important So I'm going to say Y is my most important one, because when I rotate out in Y, so if the character is standing with his toes out, I still have the ability to raise and lower the toes this way. So let's go with Y being the most important, so it's going to be the last one. And Z being the least important, so it's going to be the first one. So ZXY, let's try ZXY. So if I take Y and make that the important axis, you see it takes all three with it. Then I still have the ability to go up and down, and I still have the ability to turn the foot side to side. So I think ZXY is going to work. So same thing for the right side. I'm just going to switch this to ZXY. Okay. So now we have our controls made and we have the rotate order set. How do we connect all of that to the IK handles to make it all move? Well, it's very easy. I'm going to take all my left side IK handles and I'm going to use my middle mouse button to drag them onto the left foot control. Then I'm going to take all my right side IK handles and I'm going to middle mouse drag those onto the right foot control. You see, if I open that, there they are as children. So now if I select the control and pick it up, you can see that I can pick up my foot, and I can do the same on this side as well. Okay, so that is how easy it is to set up an inverse kinematics sort of control system. Okay, so I'm going to open up these two controls here. I'm going to select all these IK handles, and I'm going to hit Control H just to hide them so that they're not in the way. Things tend to get cluttered, so you want to try to keep your rig as neat as possible. Hide everything that doesn't need to be seen, so that it's not just cluttering up your scene. Okay, so one thing that I want to do here is then just to add a little bit more functionality into the rig here. I'm going to make sure I've deselected everything. I'm going to hit Control G, and what that's gonna do is gonna give me a new null node, which is just an empty group node. Okay, so I'm going to name this left foot control underscore buffer. Okay, so the buffer, when we're going to use a lot of buffer groups in the entire rigging process, and buffers really, what they do is they just kind of insulate my controls from different values and things like that. And if I want to be able to constrain my control without actually doing it on the control itself, then I can constrain to the buffer, and it'll give me that functionality that I'm looking for. So the buffer is going to be the parent of the foot control. Okay, I'm just going to duplicate this and name this one right foot control buffer. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take my left foot control, middle mouse, drag it under the left foot control buffer. I'm going to take my right foot control and middle mouse, drag it under the right foot control buffer. And I'm going to select that left foot control buffer. By default, the pivot is at the origin. I'm going to hold down D and V and snap that pivot to the ankle. I'm going to do the same for the right side. D and V, snap the pivot to the ankle. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to make is pole vectors. Again, pole vectors are targets for the knee. It's an object for the knee to aim at. So when we move that object around, it's going to change the direction of the knee. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate off my curve box here, and you can make a new control if you want. It's up to you. So Control D, and then I'm going to hold down V and middle mouse drag that until it snaps to the knee here. I'm going to scale it down a little bit. I don't need it to be that big. And I'm going to bring back my character just so I can see how big this should be. Probably about there's good. Hide the character again. I'm going to Control D to duplicate this and move it to the snap it to the other knee. Then I'm going to select both of them and just move them forward some distance from the knee. Okay. Again, they have values in them, so I'm just going to freeze transformations to get rid of the value. So now this is their new default position. I want to pick the left one. I'm going to call this left underscore knee PV for pole vector. Do the same for the right side. Left underscore knee PV. Sorry, right underscore knee PV. Okay, so these are the pole vectors, and the knees are going to be aiming at these pole vectors. Okay, and it's important that these pole vectors are planar with the leg joints. And because we drew this leg joint straight up and down perfectly straight, just by snapping to the knee and moving it forward is going to maintain that planarity. You'll see that when we deal with the arm later, we're going to have to use a little trick to get those pole vectors to be on the same plane. Okay. So I'm going to, with my right knee pole vector selected, I'm going to hit Control G to group it to itself. And I'm going to call that right knee PV buffer. So again, we're going to use these buffers. I'm going to select the left knee pole vector, Control G, and I'm just going to copy this name here. We're going to paste that in there and then change that to left. Okay. And I'm going to center the pivot, so modify center pivot just to get that pivot away from the origin, and do the same thing again here. So now that pivot is there. Okay. Now we need to set up our pole vector. So what I'm going to do, in order to set up a pole vector, you have to select the target first, and then you have to select the IK handle that you want to use it on. And remember, you can only do this with a rotate plane IK handle, and the ones that will rotate planes are the ones running from the hip to the knee to the ankle. Okay, so because I hid them in the viewport, I'm going to have to open up my foot control here. I'm going to do it for both of these. So open that and open that. So I have my left pole vector selected. I'm going to control click my left ankle IK in my outliner, and I'm going to go to constrain pole vector. And what that does, if I select the pole vector by itself, you see if I move it left and right, you see how that knee joint is moving. And let me see if I change my background color, if it's easier to see. You can see how that left knee is moving there. So I'm going to zero this back out. Let's do the same on this side. Select the right pole vector, select the right ankle IK, and constrain pole vector. Okay, so again, test it. You'll see that that knee is moving. So now you have independent control of that knee. So if you pick up, say, this right foot and move it somewhere, and then get your pole vector, you'll see that now I can control where that knee is going to point just by moving this. Okay, so I'm going to zero this back out and zero out my foot control to get things back to 0. Okay, so now we have the knees working as expected. The next thing we're going to do, and I'm going to switch my viewport back here. The next thing that we're going to do is to put in a heel joint. And the reason that I use a heel joint is just to determine where that rotation point is for the heel. So I'm going to bring back my geometry here and my heel joint. So I'm going to go to skeleton, create joints, and I'm going to go in my side view here. So that heel joint, I'm just going to click and sort of drag it right about there to the end of that, the heel of that boot. And I'm going to hit enter. I just need a single joint there. I want to make sure that my Y value is 0, sitting on the ground plane perfectly. So that is where my heel joint's going to be. So I'm going to again hide the character. So I have the heel joint, but when I drew it in the side view, it drew at the center of the grid there. So I'm going to hold down V and move this over. As I slide it over on this axis, I'm going to move my mouse up to this joint chain here. And what that's going to tell my is that I want to snap in line with that. And we're going to name this left heel, or left, I guess, left IK heel. Okay, Control D, duplicate it, hold down V, and again I'm just moving on this one axis. Click it, start moving, and then move your mouse towards that joint chain, and we're going to switch this to right and take the 1 off the end. Okay, so what we have to do is parent this in. So select, with that selected, I'm going to shift select my ankle joint and hit P. Do the same thing, select the heel joint, shift select the ankle joint and hit P. Okay, so this is what we have it looking like here. And you'll see why we have this ankle joint as we get further into the foot rig here. Okay, so now we have a foot setup going here, but we want to have more functionality in it. So we want to be able to tap the toes and things like that. So we're going to add that functionality into this foot control here. So I'm going to select, actually I'm going to select both of these. Oh, and actually, before I do that, let's color code these just like we did before. So the left side, enable overrides, it's going to be red. And again, this is in the, if you open up the attribute editor in the shape node, it's going to be, and then you go to object display, then you open up drawing overrides, and then you enable the overrides. And let's go find our red. There it is. And then this one should be green, which is right next to that red there. Okay, so we have our color coded controls there. Okay, so back to this. I'm going to select both of these controls here. Then I'm going to go to modify, and I'm going to go to add attribute. So before I do that, what an attribute is, these are attributes here. These are just things that are used to control different things. So if I want to control the scale X of an object, I can adjust this attribute by clicking on it and middle mouse dragging left and right in the viewport, and it's going to change that value. Okay, so we're just going to add our own custom attributes to this to give us more control over certain things. So I'm going to go to modify, add attribute, and I'm going to add a couple attributes here. I'm going to call one peel heel. So lowercase p, uppercase h. That's just the convention that's used in Maya. And if you've done a little bit of programming, then you should recognize that. I'm going to make sure that this is a float attribute. Okay, I want a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 10. And I'm going to hit add. Next one is a stand tip. Okay, another float attribute. Minimum 0, max 10. Hit add. The next one is heel pivot. Okay, float again. This time minimum of -10 and a maximum of 0. Okay. Add. And then we're going to go to twist toes. A minimum -10, maximum 10. Add that. And then a toe tap. Toe tap, and that is a minimum of -10 and a maximum of 10. And add that. Okay. And close it. We should be done. And hopefully that happened. Yep, it added them to both controls. Okay, so you can see those new attributes right there. Those are the new custom attributes that we've added. Okay, now we want to put these IK handles under the foot control. We want to put these in different groups, which are going to allow us to create certain functionality in the feet. Okay, the first thing we want to set up is our peeling of the heel. So we want to be able to have the ball toe section stay on the ground while the heel and ankle sort of rotate upwards, as if you're peeling your heel off the ground as you're taking a step. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do that is I'm going to select my left ankle IK, and I'm going to hit Control G to group it to itself. Okay. And then this is the important part. I want to make sure that I take that pivot, which by default is at the origin, and I'm going to hold down D and V, and I'm going to snap that to the ball joint. This is very important that you do that. Now, these groups that we're making here, you have to make sure that your pivot points are where they're supposed to be, because if they're not, things are not going to work. So make sure that This group that we just created that now has the ankle IK inside of it has its pivot at the ball joint. Okay, we're going to call this group that we just made left peel heel group. Okay, so this group is there for peeling the heel. If we rotate it in the x-axis, you can see that it sort of peels the heel as if someone was about to take a step. The heel comes up first before the rest of the foot picks up, right? So that is what we have just created now. So the next one we have to make is we're going to select the ball. Well, you know, while we're at it, let's go ahead and do the right side just so that we keep them together here. So I'm going to select the right ankle IK, Control G, name it right peel heel group. And again, and this is what I see if you don't get the pivots in the right spot. So if I left the pivot there, you'll see that as I rotate it in X, I'm getting something completely different from what I want. But as soon as I hold down D and V and snap that pivot to the ball and then rotate it, now I'm getting the right thing. So again, it is of utmost importance that you make sure that the pivots are in the right place. Okay, the next thing we got to do is I'm going to take the left ball IK and the left toe IK, both of them, and I'm going to hit G to group them to themselves. And again, I'm going to move the pivot point to the ball joint, and we're going to call this one left toe tap group. Do the same on the right side. Select those two IK handles, ball and toe, Control G, move the pivot to the ball, call this right toe tap group. So as the name implies, we're going to use this to tap the toes, and you'll see if I rotate it in X, I can tap my toes, and just make sure that it's working on the left side as well. Rotate it in X and it'll tap the toes, just what I want. Okay, then I'm going to select those two groups, the peel heel group and the toe tap group, and I want to hit Control G to group those together. So now both of those are sitting in a new group. Okay, and I want to take that pivot point for that new group, and I'm going to hold down D and V, and I'm going to snap it to the toe. And again, if I rotate it in X, you can see what that's doing there. Okay, it's sort of coming up onto the toes. So we're going to call this left toe pivot group. And then with this group also, if you rotate in the Y, you can see that I can sort of, as if I'm putting out a cigarette, I can do that there. And I'm just going to switch my rotate tool back to object mode. Okay, so again here, I'm going to select peel heel group and toe tap group on the right side, Control G. And we're going to call this right toe pivot group. And again, hold down D and V, snap that pivot to the toe. So again, I have that action there, and I also have that action there. All right. So the toe pivot group. Again, I'm going to hit Control. I'm going to select toe pivot group and hit Control G to group it to itself again. And I'm going to name this group left heel pivot group. So this is for pivoting from the heel, and I'm going to take that pivot point and move it to that heel joint. That's why we created that heel joint now, because we now have somewhere to snap our pivot point to. It just makes it easy. And again, if you rotate in the x-axis, you can see that by doing that, it rotates along the from the heel. So if a character is taking a step and they land with the heel, so you can land them with this heel pivot group in this position, and then as they keep going forward, they plant their foot, you would sort of take the rotation out of there. So that's what that group's for. Okay, so that's the left heel pivot group. And then same thing on this side, select that right toe pivot group, Control G, call this right heel pivot group. And again, we're going to move our pivot point to the heel, and again, we should get that motion there. We don't really want to go this way, but we just want to basically go back and then back to the default position. Okay, So with that, we have now created all the groups that we need for now. We're going to create more groups later, but we want to take this in steps so that we're not trying to, confusing ourselves here. So now that we have all those selected, and if I hold down shift and click on this plus, you'll see that this is the hierarchy that we have here, and I'll do the same on the left side. This is what we have. I'm going to shut these because the pole vector is here. So this is what we have here. Heel pivot group that goes to toe pivot group, and under toe pivot group is the peel heel group and the toe tap group, and under peel heel group is the ankle IK, under toe tap group is the ball and toe IK. So let's connect all these groups to these attributes that we had made here. Okay, so to do that, we're going to use set driven key, and to get to set driven key, we can go to the animation menu, set key, and set driven key, and go to set. The other way is to just open up your rigging shelf here, and this button right here is your set driven key. So I'm going to switch this back to rigging. So here's set driven key. So what set driven key does is it allows you to control the attribute on one object with the attribute on another object, basically. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So you have here driver and you have here driven. The driver is the one that is controlling the one that is in the driven. Okay, so the attribute that you pick in the driver is going to be controlling the attribute that you pick in the driven. Okay, so what is our driver? Our driver is going to be this foot control here. So I'm going to go ahead, select it, and load the driver. You'll see that by default, when you open up the set driven key, whatever's selected in the viewport gets automatically put into the driven. So the foot control was selected, so it got put in here. We don't want it as the driven, we want it as the driver. So I'm going to make sure it's selected and hit load driver. Okay, so what do we want to drive? Let's start with the peel heel group. So I'm going to go left peel heel group, and I'm going to load that as driven, and you'll see that that's now in there. So if we're doing the left peel heel group first, we're going to select peel heel as the attribute that we want to control. We want to use to control this peel heel group. And if you remember when I did the testing of the rotation on the peel heel group, I did rotate X. So I'm going to select rotate X there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set a key. And what that does is it creates a relationship between the peel heel attribute on the foot control and the rotate X attribute on peel heel group. So both of them are at 0 right now. If I select my foot control, you'll see that the peel heel is at 0. If I select the peel heel group, you'll see that the rotate X is at 0. And what you'll notice is that rotate X has this blue sort of tick right here. And that's telling me that there's a set driven key connection on this attribute. Okay, so it's color coded. And the more you work in Maya, you will see the different colors. If it is blue, it's a set driven key. If it is yellow, it is a direct connection of some kind. If it is purple, it's an expression. If it is a lighter blue than this, it's a constraint. So there's different colors, and you learn to recognize what it is just by the color. Okay, so we've set a key at 0. So we've told them that when this is 0, this is also going to be 0. All right, when the peel heel attribute is at 0, then the rotate X attribute is also going to be at 0. Then we want to go back to our foot control, set our peel heel all the way to 10, which was the maximum that we set. Then come back to the peel heel group here and decide just how far we want to push this. And I'm just going to click on the rotate X attribute, and I think the value that I used, if I keep rotating, is about 45 degrees. But this, honestly, this is up to you. And you could do this where you don't have a maximum and let the animator decide how far they want to take it. But I'm going to maybe, I don't know, somewhere here. This is you want to overdo it for sure, because the animator does not have to go this far. So I'm going to say 60 degrees, and I'm going to set another key. Okay, so what I've told it is now that when my peel heel value is at a value of 10, I want my peel heel group rotation X value to be a value of 60. So that creates a relationship between those. And if I come back here, select my peel, heal, and scrub left and right in the viewport, you can see that now as I go from 0 to 10, this thing rotates from 0 to 60. Okay, so that is basically what set-driven key does. It just creates a relationship between two different attributes where one is driving the other, and it's really, really useful. Okay, so that's what we have here. And and the way this relationship is stored is it's stored as an animation graph. So I'm going to go to Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. And I want to make sure I select my left peel heal group. And just in case you didn't notice, you can actually select these objects just by clicking here and here. Okay, so if I select the peel heal group here, you'll see that there's an animation curve here. What that animation curve is showing me the relationship between those two attributes, right? So I go from 0 to 60. You can see it's 60 degrees in that rotate X. And I go from 0 to 10 in the peel heal attribute. Okay, so it just stores that as a graph. You'll notice that by default, Maya will put flattened tangents. If I select this, you can see that this graph has a flat tangent. That is Maya's default. It allows for easing in and easing out, so it eases out of this key and then speeds up and then eases into this key. You can leave it like that. I prefer to take both these keys and then hit this button here, which is going to make this curve linear. That way I can allow the animator to determine how much ease in and ease out they want. But like I say, if you want to leave it the way it was, you can do that. So I'm just going to move this over here. And let's do the same thing on the right side. So I'm going to load up my right foot control as the driver. I'm going to load up my right peel heal group as the driven. I'm going to select peel heal. I'm going to select rotate X. On this side, I'm going to set a key at 0 just to initialize that relationship and also tell it that where the starting point is. Then I'm going to select my peel heal, set it to 10. Come back to my, I'm going to select my foot control, set the peel heal to 10, and select the peel heal group, set this to 60, and key that. So again, if I scrub this back and forth, you'll see that I have my peeling, and you can do both of them at the same time, as you can see. Okay, so we have now set up the peeling of the heel, and let me see if you can notice the difference, because I haven't set the graph for the right side. I did it for the left side. So let's see if we can tell a difference here in the way that it peels. You'll see that the left side starts faster because the right side is sort of easing out of that position. So it's accelerating slowly. And you can see that they're not the same. So I'm going to leave it right about here. When they get to the end, you'll see that the left one the left one just goes at a constant speed till the end, whereas the right one sort of starts to slow down as it gets to the end there, and eventually they get there at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to leave them separated like this. I'm going to select my right peel heal group here, which is going to bring up my graph. And as soon as I select the graph and make it linear, you'll see that now they line up perfect. Okay, so that is just something that I prefer to do. If you'd rather not do that, that's absolutely fine. It's just something that I prefer to do. So as you can see now, they are in perfect sync. And this way the animator can then, when they do the peel heal attribute, if they need some ease in and ease out, they can just do it themselves with the animation graph that's created by the peel heal when you set keys on it. Okay, so moving on, let us continue. Let's do the toe tap group next. So I'm going to, since we're working, we have the right side on here. I'm just gonna go with the right side. So I'm gonna load up my right toe tap group, load it as driven, and again I'm using rotate X. And make sure, this is where the set driven key can mess you up. If I'm working on toe tap, I need to make sure that I have toe tap selected. If I set keys right now, it would have set keys on peel heel, and that would have been the wrong thing. So go to toe tap, set a key at 0. I'm going to set my toe tap attribute, so I'm going to select my foot control, set my toe tap to -10. Go back here, and I'm going to set my rotate X here to somewhere around, let's see, about 75. Let's go 75, right about there, or 80. Let's go 80. And I'm going to set a key there. So between 0 and -10, I go from a rotation of 0 to a rotation of 80. Okay, so I'm going to set this to +10, and I'm going to set this rotation to about -50 or so. Let's go -60. Let's overdo it, and set a key. Okay, so what that's going to give me is that I'm going to get this motion here, just tapping the toes. Okay, so let's do the same on the left side. So load my control as the driver, select toe tap, load my left toe tap group as the driven, and select rotate X, set a key at 0, go to the foot control, -10, go to toe tap group, and what did I say, 80, set a key, go back to the foot control, set it to 10, go back to the toe tap group and set it to -60, and key that. And again, I'm just going to select them both just to make sure that they match up nicely. So there is, and if I look at the side view right here, so at 10 they go there, and then there we go. And of course I want to make sure that I select my toe tap groups, open up my Windows Animation Editors graph editor, bring this up in here, and I'm just going to select everything and make it linear. And there we go. So again, up and down, just like that. And zero it out. That is now set up. Okay, so, we're getting there slowly, and, save your file if you haven't in a while. You want to make sure you save often, because rigging is you can get in a lot of trouble making mistakes in rigging. So let's go ahead and continue. So we're in the left foot control here. The next one we want to do is, let's go with heel pivot. Or, you know what, let's go with stand tip there. And we're going to use the toe pivot group. So we're going to go left toe pivot group and load that as the driven. So stand tip works on the rotate X of the toe pivot group. So I'm going to set a key at 0. Then I'm going to go my foot control, and we're going to do stand tip to a value of 10. And then we're going to go to our toe pivot group and rotate X to about 80 or so. Set the key, test it out. So stand tip, set it back to 0, and you can see that's what we get. Let's go on the right side, load the driver, select the stand tip, and then load the right toe pivot group, load that as driven, go rotate X, set a key at 0, go to foot control, stand tip to 10, toe pivot group, rotate it to 80, key that, and let's make sure that they both work. Seems like we have a slowdown there, so let's see. And the way, if that happens, all you got to do is go in your Windows Animation Editors graph editor and see where the problem is. So I'm going to select both toe pivot groups. And let's go left toe pivot group, right toe pivot group. Looks like they're the same. So stand tip, up, down. This one, up, down, up, down. I think they work, but for some reason when I do them, okay, it's not doing it anymore. Okay, so that is working. Again, toe pivot groups, I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to select the curve and make it linear. Okay, so that is working. The next one is twist toes, and this one works on the same toe pivot group, but it works on the rotate Y. So key that, and we're doing the right side now. And then we're going to go twist toes. We're going to set that to a value of -10. And we're going to set the pivot group here to a value of 50 on the rotate Y. So this is where it can get confusing. Be very careful. So on the rotate Y, I'm going to set a value of 50 and set key. Then I'm going to go here, set the twist toes to 10. And on the rotate Y here, I'm going to set it to -50 and key that. So what that's giving us is, if I go twist toes, it's giving us sort of this sliding back and forth motion. So if I was putting out a cigarette or something like that, I can twist on my toes. So I'm going to zero this out. Let's load up the left side, load driver, select twist toes. Let's get the left toe pivot group, load driven, and we're going to go rotate Y, set a key. And we're going to go to -10 on twist toes. And here we're going to go to 50. Or you could make it opposite. If you wanted to go the other way, you can do that. I'm just going to keep it as is. Set a key. Go to +10. Come here, set a key at -50. Like that. And let's test that and make sure that it works. Yep. And if I select them both, see, it does that. Now let me zero them out and then make them go together. There we go. And you can see that they twist. So again, bringing back my graph editor. So toe pivot group, both of those. And these are the rotate Y values, the green ones. So I'm just going to select all of this and make it linear. Okay, and then move this away here. So save your file again. So heel pivot, we have set up peel heel, twist toes, stand tip, and toe tap. We have heel pivot yet to do, and that runs from -10 to 0. Okay, so heel pivot is right there, and then I'm going to load the left heel pivot group in as the driver. Oh, wrong one. Select the left foot control as the driver. Select the left heel pivot group as the driven. Okay, so we're going to select heel pivot from here and rotate X from here. We're going to set a key at 0. Then we're going to go to a heel pivot value of -10. And we're going to set the heel pivot group value to about -50. Okay, and you can go further. We can go -60 just to really put it out there. And set another key. And then let's test this. Heel pivot. So if he's, he's impatient or whatever, you can tap your toes this way, or you can do it the other way as well. Let's do the right side. Load driver as the control, heel pivot. Load the right heel pivot group as the driven. Rotate X. Set a key at 0. Set this to -10. Come here and set this, what did I say, -60. And key that. Okay, so if we zero this out and do them together, there we go. So again, I'm going to select those heel pivot groups on the left and the right, select the graph, linearize them, and there we go. So from what we've done so far, you can see how you might be able to build a like if a character was stepping, how they'll land with the heel. So you'd have your heel pivot back here. They land with the heel, then you sort of key that off so they plant their foot, and then if they continue to step, then they will peel their heel, and then they will go to a stand tip while also taking off that peel heel and then picking up the foot to go. Okay, so you can see you have the different components of a step built into that. Okay, so make sure everything works. Save your file. And this might be a good time to increment your save. So I'm at version 1 here. So I'm going to go to version 2 and save that. Okay, so like I was saying a second ago, you have all the components to do a step. But in order to do that step, you kind of have to key things on and off at different times, which is great to have the full control over it like that. But, well, you know, I'm going to add some functionality here that will allow me to just have one attribute that does all of that. Okay. So here's the way that we're going to do that. I'm going to deselect everything and hit Control G. That's going to make me an empty group here. And I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that empty group. The first one I'm going to call left foot roll heel pivot group. Now, that's a long name, but it makes sense. And then the second one I'm going to call left foot roll peel group. Okay, select both those groups and duplicate them, and then just change the L underscore to an R underscore, and then take off the ones on the end there. Okay, so let's start with the foot roll heel pivot group. Because the heel pivot group, we're going to move its pivot to the heel. Let's do that on the right side as well. And then the foot roll peel group is going to be at the ball joint. So this is the left, so we're going to put it the left ball to the right foot roll pivot group. That's going to go there. So the heel pivot groups are at the heel, and the foot roll peels are at the ball of the feet. Okay, so we shouldn't have any transformations in there. If we do, just freeze transformations on. Okay, so we have those 4 groups now created. The next thing we got to do is we have to insert those into this sort of structure that we've created here inside of the foot control. Okay, so we're just adding layers of functionality as we go. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we're going to put the foot roll peel group, this one, inside of the toe pivot group. So I'm going to just select the left foot roll peel group and middle mouse drag it to the left toe pivot group to put it in there. So now it's part of that group. Then I'm going to take my left peel heel group and I'm going to put it inside that new foot roll peel group. So the peel heel and foot roll peel basically do the exact same thing. But because I have keys on this one already, I'm just going to add the second layer for my automatic foot roll. Okay, so peel heel group is inside of there. Okay, left foot roll heel pivot, I'm going to put under the foot control. So I'm going to middle mouse drag that under the foot control. Okay, And then I'm going to put this left heel pivot group under that new foot roll heel pivot group. Okay, so this is what we have now. Now we have inserted those groups in there. Then I'm going to take the left toe pivot group, hit Control G just to group it to itself. Let's open that back up here. And I'm going to name this left foot roll toe pivot group. So left foot roll toe pivot group. Hit enter, and then take its pivot point and slap it on at the toe. Okay, so that might be a little confusing. We're going to go through it again for the right side. Okay, so again, I'm going to take the right foot roll peel group, so right foot roll peel. I'm going to put it inside the right toe pivot group, which is there. Just middle mouse drag it on top of right toe pivot group, which makes it a child of that. Then I'm going to take my right peel heel group and put it inside that foot roll peel group. Okay, so that's there. Then I'm going to take my foot roll heel pivot group, put that under the foot control. Then I'm going to take my right heel pivot group and put that under that new group, which is right there. Oh, and open everything back up. Okay, then I'm going to select my right toe pivot group and Control G to group it to itself. And I want to name this new group right foot roll toe pivot group, and hit enter. Okay, so take your time, get it right. And of course, I need to move this pivot point to the toe. And don't forget those. The pivot points are incredibly important. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to select both of these foot controls, modify, add attribute. We got to add a new attribute. We're going to call this foot roll. So foot roll, make sure you don't use any spaces here. And this is going to run from a -10 to 20. And hit OK. So both of these should now have that foot roll attribute in there. Okay, so back in the set driven key window, and again, that button there, if you closed it, you can reopen it with this button here. I'm just going to save now that I made all those groups. I don't want to have to do that again. So let's see. Start with the left foot control right here. I'm going to load that as the driver. And we're doing the foot roll, so I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to select the left foot roll heel pivot group as the driven. Okay, and we're going to be messing with rotate X on that. Okay, so let's set a key at 0. So we'll just key that to get it going. Then I'm going to set my foot roll here on the foot control to -10. And then I'm going to set my foot roll heel pivot group to a value of -55 or so. -55. I think I went -60 with the other one, so let's go there and set a key. Okay, so if we go to foot control between 0 and 10, so it's just doing what the other one is doing, between -10 and 0. Okay, so let's go back to 0 here. Then what we're going to do is select the left foot roll peel group and load that as the driven, and do the rotate X again. Okay, let me just check my notes to make sure I've got this right. So we're going to set a key at 0. Okay. Then we're going to set foot roll to 10 on the control. So set this to 10. Remember, it runs all the way to 20. So we're going to set it to 10. And then go back to our foot roll peel group. And rotate X, we're going to set to 60. Okay. And set that key there. So what's happening now with the foot roll is that from -10, it's there, then it goes to 0. We got the flat foot. Then we go to all the way to 10. It starts to peel. It starts to pick up the heel there. It peels the heel, and of course the last step is to go to the toes. So we're going to set this at 10. Actually, no. So what we need to do is turn off the peeling of the heel at 20. So we're going to go to 20 on the foot roll attribute on the foot control. Then we're going to go back to the peel heel group here and set this back to 0 and set that key. So what's happening now is -10 to 0 to 10 and then 20 puts the foot back down. Now you might say, well, that's not making sense. Why would he put his foot back down? And you'll see why in a second. So then what we need to do is load up our left foot roll toe pivot group as the driven. And again, rotate X. Want to make sure that we are at a value of, on the foot roll here, we want to be at 10. Okay, we're not at 0, we're at 10. And we're going to set a key with the rotate X value here at 0. So I'm going to key that. Then we're going to go to a value of 20. And then I'm going to set my my rotation here to a value of 75. Okay, so that is why we made the peeling of the heel turn back off at 20, because we want at this point at 20 to be looking like this. If that peel was still on, then this foot would be bent forward and looking kind of weird. So we wanted to peel heel. And as we go from 10 to 20, we want to turn off the peel heel while also turning on that sort of coming up on the toes, okay? So now if we test it, so again, at -10, we have that, plants the foot at 0, starts to peel it up between 0 and 10, and then picks up the foot to go. And this is where the animator would then animate the foot control going up into the step. Okay, so we have sort of like an automatic foot roll, like rolling through that step. So what we've done is we've given the animator the ability to use that automatic one, or to just do it themselves manually with the other attributes. Okay, so it's nice to be able to have both. You don't want to just do the automatic one by itself. You want to still give them the ability to do it manually, because some animators like to do the stuff manually because they can finesse it and get it real nice. Okay, so that was the left foot. I'm going to save here. Let's do the right foot. So I'm going to load my driver as the right foot control, and I'm going to start with, what was the first one here? Right foot roll heel pivot group. Load that as the driven. Select X here, rotate X here, so foot roll here. We're going to set a key at 0. Okay, then I'm going to go on my right foot control. I'm going to set this to -10, and we're going to go back to this, and we're going to set this to a value of -60. Key that. Okay, then we're going to go back to 0. Well, let's test this out. So, yep, so that part works. So I'm going to go back to 0 here, and then in the driven, I'm going to load up right foot roll peel right there. Right foot roll peel group, load that as the driven. rotate X, set a key at 0. And from 0 to 10, so I'm going to set this foot roll to 10, then set the foot roll peel group to a value of 60, and set that key. So again, let's test this out from -10, then plants the foot and starts to peel it. So that's working as expected. Okay, and then we have to set this to 20 to turn set this back to 0 to turn that peel heel off and set another key. So let's test that. So down and then goes back up. Okay, peels and then goes back up, just like we needed to do. Okay, then we need to do the right foot roll toe pivot group right there. Load that as the driven, rotate X, and we're going to make sure that our foot control is set to 10, and set a key with a 0 rotation. And then we're going to set our foot roll to 20 and set our toe pivot group here to 75. And I hope that's the same value I used there. So we have that. So again, to test it out, -10, 0, 10, 20. Okay. So just making sure that I have them. So there, and there. So yeah, they're synced up nicely. And there we go. Okay, now for these ones, I tend to, because it's an automatic sort of foot roll, I tend to leave all these with the ease ins and ease outs, because it is a compound movement. It's not just a single thing where the animator could do that for themselves. So I tend to leave these the way they are. But if you want to, you can make them linear as well. All right, so now that we're there, what we have to do now is just clean things up so that we don't have any information that we don't need. Okay, so I'm going to select both foot controls, and I don't need scale and visibility attributes for these. Okay, so I'm just going to select scales and visibility, right click, go to lock and hide selected. Okay, that just gets rid of them. We don't need the animator having stuff there that they don't need. There's never going to be a time where you're going to need to scale these controls up and down, so we need to get rid of that. Then I'm going to select both of their control buffers, and I'm going to lock and hide everything except for the visibility channel. So lock and hide selected. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the pole vectors here. I'm going to select them both. So again, I don't need, let's see, I don't need the rotates, the scales, or the visibility on the pole vector. So I'm going to lock and hide those. And again, if we go to the buffers for the pole vectors, those two there, I don't need anything except visibility. So lock and hide all of that. Okay, so there we have our IK foot setup done. It works. All these things, all the heel pivots and peel heels and all these things work along with our foot roll. Okay, that's all set. And if I zero this back out, it sends me back to my default position. I'm going to close my set driven key. So this is what we have at this point here. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and let's see, we've been almost an hour and 20 minutes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue in another video. I don't want to be putting out 2-3 hour videos. So we're going to self-contain this here for the IK legs, and then we will continue with the FK legs, and then we'll get into the IK FK blending. Okay, so please, if you enjoy this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back with the next part of the leg setup in the next video. See you soon.